Hi, I'm Anita Murray with All Things Home, bringing you another edition of Insider Insights. I am here with Rosaline Hill, a principal architect, planner, and development consultant with over 25 years dedicated to designing homes and communities that work. She is the founder of RJH Architecture and Planning, Walkable Ottawa, Ottawa Co-housing, and Building In, each building on her passion for smarter, more sustainable housing solutions. Today's topic, the missing middle. Welcome, Rosalind.
Hi, thanks, Anita.
You have long advocated for smart and effective infill housing. What is effective infill housing? Why is it important? And what is often wrong with current infill in Ottawa?
Well, I would say effective infill housing is housing that makes an existing neighborhood even better than it is to begin with. So, housing that enhances an existing neighborhood. A, a lot of people really love their existing neighborhood. There are characteristics of their streets that are really important to them. So, good infill enhances those physical characteristics. Um, and oftentimes, our older neighborhoods don't have a lot of density. They don't have a lot of people. They don't have a lot going on. And attempts at small shops nearby tend to fail because of the low densities. So, oftentimes, what it takes to enhance a neighborhood is more people. So, intensification. But really good intensification brings people a mix of households, allows people to stay in the neighborhood who otherwise would have to migrate out of it because they couldn't find a dwelling that suits their evolving household needs. And good infill allows for variety and dynamic streets. So when you walk down the street, kind of it feels good. It fits. It looks like it fits in. Makes the place a more interesting street to walk
Okay. What is the missing middle and why is it an issue?
down. Okay, so missing middle. We traditionally have thought of housing in very clear categories or typologies. So single, semi, town, triplex, apartment building. We think of apartment buildings as those buildings where there's a bunch of little units in a building and not a lot of connection to the outside because there's just one entrance door for everybody and maybe an exit at the back. And because we've been sorting residential uses into those typologies, there's a whole lot of ways that you can build housing that don't fit in any of those categories because the categories are missing. So there we have the missing middle. So examples of missing middle could be um, front to back townhouses or stacked units that are oriented different ways, small apartment buildings that function differently with respect to their surroundings so that those people feel connected to the community as opposed to being in a sort of isolated behind their one single entrance door. So all of those things are missing from our normal understanding of housing.
I think we're starting to see a lot of that type of housing come into new developments like the builder subdivisions, but maybe not so much when it comes to inner city neighborhoods.
Yeah, so it's nice to see more variety in the way that we build our expansion growth areas, and to have that mix. Many of those expansion areas, though, are following uh, an expanded script, as opposed to, proponents of missing middle would say, let's have less of a script. So, those expansion areas are now seeing more stacked townhouses, more combination of apartments with townhouse below, that kind of thing, which is great. But creative designers can do wonderful things if we just don't add in all of these categories that are not necessary. They're not achieving anything except limiting the outcome. That, yes, in our urban areas, it's particularly important that you free designers to come up with solutions that work because all the situations are a little bit different because the context where it exists.
Well, and that kind of leads into the next question, which is in broad strokes, what should government, the housing industry, the public do to address the missing middle?
So step one is let go of those typologies. And in Ottawa, We just did. Our new zoning bylaw largely departs from typological categories of housing, not completely, but mostly, and that's a really important step forward. So we see that progressive thinking unfolding across Canada slowly. It's a really important first step for governments to let go of those preconceived ideas of what housing has to be. Um, and there's a lot more that needs to happen, though, in the context of our housing crisis. We really need to allow intensification to be repeatable. And across the country, intensification has been custom. And in many instances, it has to be. So if you're intensifying perhaps on a little old main street and you've got a wonky shaped piece of property that you're trying to fill in, well, that's going to be a custom solution. But across Canada, our older neighborhoods, so neighborhoods that predate 1980, the vast majority of them are all very much the same. They have the same bones, rectangular lots with a short end fronting onto the streets, similar lot sizes. And it's a huge opportunity for a repeating solution for infill. And that would bring the cost of housing down, allow for diversity in neighborhoods. So even though we're repeating a solution, we're repeating it into a context that's largely larger single family homes. And this would allow those neighborhoods to be infused with 1, 2, 3 bedroom units of different sizes. So, people often think, repeating solution, that's going to be terrible. We'll be like machines living in boxes, but not at all. In fact, it's the kind of repetition that brings diversity because our neighborhoods are kind of the same right now. So in order to get that kind of future for Canada, where we can afford our homes, where there's different options for housing in neighborhoods for different households, we actually need federal leadership to bring us all together because our regulations are municipality by municipality. And municipalities aren't staffed to cope with the level of challenge right now because we need such a significant shift in the way that we understand housing and in the way that we regulate housing. So the idea that every municipality across Canada must now drop everything and figure that out, that's unrealistic. We need some federal leadership. We need collaboration between the federal, the provincial, and the municipal governments.
Is the design catalog that the federal government came out with, is that part or a step in the right direction?
Yeah, it's a really important step in the right direction because I think it's awakened people to understand that repetition is valuable and important as we move forward. And it's allowed people to imagine small multi-unit buildings that could fit in neighborhoods. Most catalog designs only go to 4 units per building, which isn't actually enough intensification to work. So most business models for infill across Canada depend on 6 or more units. The cost of construction is so high, the cost of land is so high, you can't eke out any profit or even break even with only 4 units. So the catalog curators are starting to think now about adding in more more dense developments, as I understand, which is an important evolution. But there's so much more work to be done, though, than just that catalog. In order to get a design that's really worth repeating, we need to be very careful about what we design, where it's intended to be used, and how the business model works. We also need to be mindful that repeating designs need to have a little bit of a kit of parts approach because what's worth repeating in one place 5 years later might need to be a little bit different. Or if it's repeated in another place, it might need to be adjusted to that context. And so there's lots to be learned from the catalog. It is important, but it's the beginning of a journey. I think the end point of that journey is very exciting. It's a place where across Canada, we have a unified, fairly consistent way of regulating multi-unit infill housing across the country. Municipality to municipality, the words would be a little different because everybody's bylaw is a little different, but it could result in a relatively unified development opportunity for multi-unit low-rise infill that's appropriate in neighborhoods. And in that context, the industry would respond with an endless number of catalog style opportunities, right? You'd have modular manufacturers right across the country, factories having standardized designs that they're selling. And you'd be able to go online and just Google and see, well, which design would fit on my piece of property. You can't do it today because the regulations are different everywhere. It's a huge can of worms. But in this future that I imagine, you'd be able to quickly just figure, oh, right, well, I'm going to get mine shipped from Aurelia, or I'm going to get mine shipped from Smith Falls because they've got just the right thing for me in this piece of property. And when we're at that place for housing in Canada, we'll just be so much more better off. Housing will be much more affordable. The industry will flow smoothly, and we'll be able to take advantage of the opportunity of mass production in a way that really makes our communities so much better.
Here's hoping it doesn't take us too long to get there. So yeah. I want to thank you so much, Rosaline, for joining us today and sharing your insights into housing in Ottawa and Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita.